This is Talking Point on StratNews Global. I'm Amitabh Revi. On our panel today, two special guests from London, Rahul Roy-Chaudhury. He's the Senior Fellow, Head of the South Asia Program at the International Institute for Strategic Studies. Dr. Chaudhury, thanks for coming on StratNews again.
Well, thank you, Amitabh.
And also from the same city is Dr. Walter C. Ladwig. He's an associate professor at the Department of War Studies, King's College, London, and also associate fellow with Asian Security at the Royal United Services Institution. Dr. Ladwig, a pleasure to have you on StratNews as well for the first time and hopefully not the last.
Really pleased to be here. Thank you.
Dr. Chaudhury, just talking about India and the UK and when that virtual conference between the two prime ministers does really happen, two visits that BoJo has postponed because of COVID, first in the UK and now in India. But I was just looking at one of your latest articles, and one of the pillars that you had written a lot about is on defense cooperation and how changing situations both internationally and internally in India in terms of reforms could take that to the next level, Dr. Chaudhury?
Thank you, Amitabh, for referring to my article. I think what we're seeing is that for the first time in the India-UK relationship, defense and security issues are up front and center. They have been put across as one of the 5 pillars of the relationship between the two countries for the next 10 years. And this is a result both of the changes in the UK, essentially the UK's post-Brexit foreign and security policy focus on the Indo Pacific that the UK's integrated review brought out last month, but also a conscious decision by the leadership of both India and the UK to upgrade their strategic relationship and have a quantum leap in the relationship. So it's both the UK perspective, the global developments, and also India's own decision to move forward on the security partnership of the relationship.
Dr. Ladwig, India-UK has often been looked at as a poor cousin in terms of India's international relations with other countries. You've been writing a lot from early this year as well on how both countries seem to be now serious about each other.
It's definitely the case that the UK has been pursuing a better relationship with India for some time. I think the real change that Rahul's already alluded to is that we now have a government in Delhi that seems to be leaning into the relationship as well. Modi administration has clearly signaled that they want to upgrade ties with the UK. It's really unfortunate that Prime Minister Johnson couldn't make the trip for Republic Day, because I think that would have had important symbolic value. But it is the case that as Delhi is looking around the world, European partners have value for India in terms of helping diversify strategic partnerships, niche capabilities that the UK and others bring to the table. And so there is this convergence where both sides want to lean into the relationship, I think, for the first time in decades.
And just to take up from that point, Mr. Chaudhury, I mean, you've been pointing out how a benchmark needs to be set, visibly at least, apart from, actuals on the ground. And a very interesting fact that you pointed out, that the last defense minister to have an official visit to the UK was, George Fernandez in 2002?
Yes, Amitabh. I mean, it's a sad reality that took place, nearly 20 years ago. This is the UK hasn't had a visit by a full cabinet level defense minister for 20 years. And I think this is especially important because there has been a strategic partnership between India and the UK formally for the last 17 years, since September 2004, when the term strategic partnership was first used in a joint statement between the two countries. So I think what we have today is a real opportunity to ensure that the unfulfilled potential of the strategic partnership of both countries for the last 17 plus years is going to be met. And it's important for the strategic aspect, the defense and security, but also in terms of the broader relationship. Remember, in the next 8 months, by the end of this calendar year, there will be 3 prime ministerial visits between India and the UK. We'll have Prime Minister Modi coming for the G7 D11 summit in the middle of June to the UK. He will come back for the climate change conference summit in November, and we expect Prime Minister Boris Johnson to visit India by the end of by November this year. So I think the context is important, that politically there is finally a political impetus to move forward on this relationship, which I haven't seen following these developments for nearly 2 decades now.
Dr. Ladwig, and that impetus is also driven, like Mr. Chaudhury pointed out, by the integrated defense review and the tilt towards the Indo Pacific, with India being a crucial tenet of that.
Yeah, I think India's been looking for the UK to sort of stake out a position in the Indo Pacific for some time. I think they've been quite notable by their absence. I mean, there was a lot of intent. And I should say the UK is doing quite a lot in the Indo-Pacific region in places like the Gulf, like in East Africa and South Asia, but they were very slow compared to even other European countries to kind of formally articulate an Indo-Pacific strategy. So I think that is welcome, but we've also seen some parallel developments. So the UK for a long time after Brexit, was looking potentially towards China as a key driver of a post-Brexit economic focus for the country, and that raised eyebrows in Delhi. Pakistan has traditionally been a difficult relationship between sort of London and Delhi. I think for reasons of India's own, the bilateral relationship there has taken some heat out. That's gotten better, but we're also seeing the Johnson government take some real steps to sort of show that they understand what India's vision of international terrorism is, and that it doesn't just apply to attacks on Westerners. So I think all of those things have come together. It's not just the Indo-Pacific tilt that has increased the comfort level between the two capitals.
All of those coming together, but how important is that integrated review and the Indo-Pacific tilt to Mr. Chaudhury? And we also know, of course, the HMS Queen Elizabeth will be making a trip to the region as soon as she's fit to do that.
Well, I think the integrated review really lays the foundation of the UK's post-Brexit foreign and security and development policy. This is a once-in-a-generation foreign policy initiative that is taking place. So it is hugely important to the UK. The key is the operationalization of this. How best to operationalize the tilt towards the Indo-Pacific. And here there are 2 or 3 sort of points to make. I think one is that the tilt that we talk about is still only a framework. It is not a full-fledged policy towards the Indo-Pacific. And as Walter mentioned, other countries like France, Germany, the Netherlands, and the EU soon will have full-fledged policies towards the Indo-Pacific. So it's important, I think, in the next few months for the UK to develop this framework into a full-fledged policy. The second point is that India is recognized as one of 3 major powers in the integrated review. It is very clear that the UK seeks to massively improve the relationship with India, which isn't there for other countries. But equally important, I think, is the Defense Command paper that was published a week after the integrated review, which goes further in many ways than the integrated review in relation to India, and talks about India being a key pillar for the UK's regional approach, the approach to the Indo-Pacific. And so I think, again, there are elements there that are very useful. But my third point in this respect is what is key is operationalization of this. And that is going to be really the key challenge, but also the opportunity in the relationship as we go ahead, which is why a roadmap for India-UK relations to 2030 with the defense and security pillar is fundamentally important.
Dr. Ladwig, just going to get one of our regular viewers here who has a question or a comment. Matara, who says, I'm sorry, but the UK has lost a lot of its strategic importance because of Brexit. The UK needs India far more now. How do you respond to that, Dr. Ladwig?
I wouldn't necessarily agree with that. The UK is still a major economy. It has a major military force with presence based forward deployed forces in the Gulf, in Southeast Asia, in parts of the world that are important for India. It's a major development player in parts of the Indo Pacific, certainly in East Africa. It's still a UN Security Council member, has a leading voice in many major international organizations. So, you know, I know that that's a sort of fashionable thing to say. I don't necessarily think that it all adds up. And quite frankly, you know, the European Union is a major economic power, but it is still struggling, as much as the French would like, it's still struggling to position itself as a major foreign policy player in the Indo-Pacific. So we're still seeing largely individual EU member countries make their presence felt, not the EU as a whole.
Mr. Chaudhury, though I'm sticking a lot to the defense and strategic aspect of it, I just get to trade, though we had played out a paper I wanted to get your response to. But when you talk about the Indo-Pacific, the Indian Ocean, the Western Indian Ocean region where India and UK would have a lot of commonality, how do you see, you know, places like Dukum or Djibouti playing a part in India and UK cooperating?
Thank you, Amitabh. Before that, could I just respond to your viewer?
Absolutely.
I know Walter,
Absolutely.
I know it's important to respond to questions that are given, and I think my response is that you know, I think it'll be a short-sighted view to look at the India-UK relationship in that prism. So that prism, you know, who needs the other more than the other. What's important, I think, for India is look at the UK to see the niche areas that the UK could help India sort of, you know, operationalize on security issues, on defense issues. That is important to India. So I think it's very important for India to look at the relationship from a national interest perspective on the basis as to how best it will be able to work and effectively with the UK in certain niche areas. So my point is that there are opportunities here. It is up to India to grasp the opportunities. And politically, I think we've seen very wise leadership from Prime Minister Modi. You know, it's very rare for the Prime Minister of India to say that he would like a quantum leap in the relationship with the UK, notwithstanding the issues that Walter mentioned over Pakistan, etc., etc. But I think, you know, the political leadership is ready to grasp the opportunity. It is now up to the bureaucratic, the military, etc., to do so. And that brings me very nicely to your question on maritime security. When you look at the integrated review and the Defense Command paper, what one interprets from it is that maritime security cooperation will be the center of the India-UK defense cooperation. And it says very clearly that India and the UK will look towards the Indian Ocean, and I think the UK's focus on the Western Indian Ocean. I've actually just sent in a paper to be published by the official journal of the Indian Navy, Naval Dispatch, where I focus on this and I suggest that what is important to operationalize this aspect are imaginative ideas. And I suggest seven imaginative ideas to do this. I won't bore you with ideas, but one important one is Dukum. Absolutely. Dukum is a strategically located port in Oman, for some of your viewers who maybe not be fully aware. It is a port that the Omani authorities have given privileged access to 3 countries initially, the US, the UK, and India. The UK has a joint logistics base in Dukum. What I suggest is that India and the UK both have strong interest, security interests in the Gulf region, the Western Indian Ocean. They need to actually add value to the interactions. This could be by using Dukum Port for joint patrols, joint exercises, have a trilateral naval exercise. The UK is absent from all of India's trilateral naval exercises. Why shouldn't there be a trilateral naval exercise in the Western Indian Ocean among the UK, India, and the US? What about capacity building? Can Oman be useful for India and the UK to assist capacity building for the Gulf states? Because here we are looking at a concentration of security interests for India and the UK on Gulf security. Tremendously important for India, and equally important for the UK.
Equally important for both countries. Dr. Ladwig is also trade, and I brought up that article again a little earlier, but if I could bring it up again, written on the 21st, I think, by Shankar Singham, Eastern Promise. And one of the suggestions in that article is that the UK could play a bigger part in getting holds a key, so to speak, to getting India to fulfill trade agreements. Is that something you agree with, or isn't there a lot even for both countries to do to finally get to a stage where there's a trade agreement?
So I think it's really important that we have measured and modest expectations on the economic front. There's a lot of potential there, and people talk quite a lot about the opportunities, but the politics are complicated. And certainly, although there have been really important economic reforms at home in India, the Modi government has not necessarily sent out signals that it's in a rush to sign a range of free trade deals with any country. And even the enhanced trade partnership agreement that was supposed to be inked on Prime Minister Johnson's visit is really just a plan to get to an eventual free trade agreement. So I don't know that the UK is necessarily in a position to try to bring India along faster than the Indian government wants to go. I know certainly the US has been at this for quite a long time, and even the sort of early harvest US-India trade deal that we thought might have been signed on the Trump watch is still dragging on. And from what I've been told, the US trade representative doesn't even have India at the moment in their top 10 list of people. I mean, the politics of trade are what they are right now. So I think, we should look at incrementalism, and we should, I'm going to say something that's somewhat contradictory. On the one hand, as Rahul has pointed out, the multiple interactions that the two prime ministers are going to have over this next year really can inject some energy and enthusiasm in the relationship. I think what we need to be careful of at the same time is setting expectations too high, or sort of letting hyperbole get a little bit ahead of us. Because if we've learned anything, or if I've learned anything from watching the evolution of the US-India relationship over the last 2 decades, is it sometimes takes a while to get, you can get to that destination, but it's not necessarily always going to be as rapidly as you would like. And you need to sort of settle in for the long haul, set realistic targets, and not let people go through the roller coaster of inflated expectations and disappointment, because that doesn't benefit anyone.
Right. Chaudhary, if you want to take a comment on trade and how you visualize that going up, and a subset of that in terms of defense and defense technology transfers again.
Sure, Amitabh. I think Walter's right. I mean, I think trade is a very difficult issue to resolve. I mean, a free trade agreement, particularly so, and we haven't really got precedents in this respect. But I think that in a way, it's important for both countries to make a genuine effort to begin negotiations or discussion on an enhanced trade partnership agreement, which will be somewhere sort of midway, possibly towards a free trade agreement, because it is a key element of the 5 pillars of the relationship. We have other pillars also. I mean, essentially they are trade and investment, health, climate change, defense and security, migration, and the issues. So I think that there are other areas also, but trade and investment, like the other 4, need to be highlighted, and a genuine effort made in that direction. In terms of defense production and cooperation, I think what is crucially important in the next go ahead is this whole issue of co-creation of where you work together. India and the UK work together on defense technologies, combine their research profiles on startups on defense issues, because unless you are able to really co-create the technology for defense, you never really have a very sort of focus and a sort of multiplier effect in defense industry. So my sense is that this is an exciting development. This is an exciting area to move forward. This has been somewhat facilitated by a 2019 agreement on defense technology between India and the UK. But what is important is that there need to be breakthrough technologies identified, or at least technologies that could have a breakthrough identified to provide funding that is required, research collaboration, etc. What we need to see fairly early on, I think, are some deliverables. And unless we have those deliverables, there will always be a question on implementation. My last quick point on this is that I agree again with Walter that, don't raise expectations. And I think by putting across a pragmatic roadmap to 2013, I think both governments are seeking to do exactly this, to say that, listen, this is what both countries hope to achieve in the next 10 years. And I think when we see the roadmap, we will see that there are tremendously pragmatic sort of perspectives in it, but also, I think, some opportunities to really elevate the bilateral strategic partnership between the two countries.
Dr. Ladwig, both of you referred to Pakistan earlier. There are irritants in the relationship, whether human rights come up, Jammu and Kashmir come up. They're discussed in British Parliament as well. Are they only irritants, or is there a considerable constituency that needs to be catered to in the UK for Pakistani or anti-Indian views?
Well, I think first thing we have to recognize is that the UK government sees its relationship with Pakistan as having importance. It has importance for counterterrorism purposes. It has importance for economic purposes, right? It's still a very large country, and a country that does have potential economic, significant economic potential should it solve a lot of its structural reasons. And that's quite apart from the fact that there is a sizable Pakistani-British population. It also happens to be particularly concentrated in certain constituencies, so you do get that sort of effect. But the fact of the matter is, many countries try to have good relations with other, pairs of states that have difficult relations. India itself has for a long period of time tried to improve its relationship with China, say before the last year, while also deepening its ties with the United States. Those aren't anything new, but I don't think you would see the two relations, India and Pakistan, of being equal importance to the UK by any means. And again, as Rahul has pointed out, India being one of only 3 countries to be really discussed in any great detail in the integrated review sends a real signal as far as the prioritization or how important India is to the UK. So Pakistan will still have relevance and it'll be important, but it's not a same situation at all. It's not a hyphenated situation, in my opinion.
Ms. Chaudhury, if you want to take that, and also related to that is, of course, the apology that has come for troops used during World War II. But there are a lot of calls within India for larger apologies for other issues, including colonialism.
Sure. Thank you. That's an easy question to tackle. Seriously, I think the Pakistan issue is not going away. The integrated review has 1 or 2 sentences only on Pakistan. But I think it's very important to understand that there is a difference between the official framework in relation to Pakistan and the non-official, the civil society aspects. And I think for a lot of the Khalistani movements that are taking, that have some resurgence in the UK at the moment, this does not have official support from the UK in any sense. Also, it's important to dehyphenate between India and Pakistan. I think India for very many years has urged the UK to dehyphenate, or as it sees the UK hyphenation, to dehyphenate India from Pakistan. And earlier this year, the UK Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office took a major decision to organizationally dehyphenate India from Pakistan in the divisions of the FCDO. So today, there is a new division which highlights India called the India and the Indian Ocean Directorate, and Pakistan is in another division, directorate on Afghanistan, Pakistan and Iran relations. So this is a marked improvement from the past when both India and Pakistan were in the South Asia division. So I think, we can't have it both ways. I mean, if we want dehyphenation, and dehyphenation is starting to take place, I think we need to encourage the dehyphenation. And one way of encouraging it is by actually looking, as I said earlier, from India's national interest. Where can the UK play a role in relation to India? That's important. I mean, there are irritants in the relationship, no doubt. Which country doesn't bilateral relationship doesn't have irritants? But I don't see that these irritants are going to drag down the potential of the strategic partnership between the two countries. In terms of apology, of course, colonialism was terrible. The UK historically has done lots of bad things in India when it had an empire, when it ruled India. But we need to look forward. I mean, today, India is a rising power, notwithstanding, of course, the COVID and the impact in the economy, which we hope will be transitory. People are looking at India around the Indian Ocean, around the Indo Pacific, globally, the role India can play. India is a member of the non-permanent member of the UN Security Council this year and for next year. I think it's very important for India to look into the future, not into the past. Because if we keep on looking into the past, then we are going to be bound by the implications of the past. It's an opportunity really for a new India to really be there in the international narrative, to focus on rule of law, on being the largest democracy in the world. These are all positive points and all points that the UK is very keen to engage India for.
Dr. Ladwig, if you want to respond to that, but I also wanted to ask you, because there's a lot of questions or comments being raised on the strategic relevance of the UK. It's not a global strategic power on its own, cannot take on China on its own, especially vis-a-vis Hong Kong, despite all the legislative measures that are being taken. But that is the crux, right? I mean, the international relations shouldn't be left to the binary that Beijing is trying to portray it as in narrative of the US versus China. Middle countries should also be getting together to show how they respond to China. Would you agree with that, Dr. Ladwig?
I would. I think they have a critical role to play, and it's even more important because, for the reason you just suggested, China is trying to frame a lot of these issues simply in terms of a binary. It's America who has a problem with actions in the South China Sea. It's America who has a problem with what may be happening with the Uyghurs. It's America who may have a problem with what's happening in Hong Kong. And the more that various other middle powers, as you call them, speak up, but major European states, countries like India as well, that really punctures that narrative that it's simply a bilateral dispute and that the U.S. is just perennially objecting to anything that China does. And it's when you see more countries speaking up, you see that these concerns and views are more widely held than Beijing would like to be portrayed.
Chaudhury, if you want to take the last word on that, and also another question, it's asking what UK stand on India's permanent seat in the UN Security Council is. We've seen some support on Masood Azhar there of late.
So I think we can't sort of seek the India-UK strategic partnership to sort of be the silver bullet, the magic wand that will solve all of India's sort of security concerns. Definitely not. I mean, of course, the UK has its limitations, both politically and in terms of capacity. My point is that it's important to understand those limitations, to operationalize the strategic connectivity. And we haven't talked about cybersecurity, for example, or artificial intelligence, where the UK is strong in, or counterterrorism issues, intelligence cooperation, to operationalize those key areas where the UK is strong in for India's interest in part of the strategic partnership. So the Western Indian Ocean is a key area for India and the UK where things can move ahead. I mean, I do a lot of work in the Gulf region. I have traveled quite extensively in the region, especially to Oman and Bahrain. And the UK has deep strategic leverages that we can't really imagine in that sense. And these have continued, over years and decades. And in a way, the ability, the heft that the UK still is able to deploy in certain areas like the West Indian Ocean are extraordinary, and one should learn from these developments. So I think we should be careful as to, and I think Walt is absolutely right. Let's not get ahead of the game on this. There is a clear political direction for a strategic partnership to elevate the strategic partnership to enhance defense cooperation, and let's just now start operationalizing this and move forward on this. That's very important. In terms of the UN Security Council, the UK has been a consistent supporter of India's membership of an expanded UN Security Council. And this has been over the years and a consistent policy. But we all know that that is not enough. That itself is not going to get India into an expanded UN Security Council. So perhaps, another area of cooperation is for India and the UK to work together in the UN Security Council on some of these issues. We've seen some cooperation recently in terms of Myanmar. I think we'll see now in terms of Afghanistan, where India is the chair of the Taliban committee, for sanctions against the Taliban. So again, there are areas here that can be utilized. But the bottom line is not to get ahead of ourselves on this. Let's be pragmatic. Let's focus on implementation. And my last point, Amitabh, is that for me, the bottom line is that there are only the next 12 to 18 months for implementation of parts of the roadmap of 2030. And the reason I say that is that after 18 months, India will start going into electoral mode for general elections in mid-2024. So what we have really is a short period of 12 to 18 months. And I'm very keen that we see high visible deliverables and impact in this 12 to 18 month period for the 2030 roadmap, especially on one of the key pillars, that is defense and security.
Rahul Roy-Chaudhury, absolutely appreciate you coming on StratNews and giving us your opinion, expertise, and views, and all the best for the Shangri-La dialogue, especially in times like this. I do believe you need a lot of luck on that.
Thank you, Amitabh. I booked my flights to Singapore and back for the 4th and 5th of June. Unfortunately, this time I may not be able to transit.
To stop over in Delhi. And Dr. Ladwig, it was an absolute pleasure having you for the first time on StratNews Global. We'll keep coming back to you as well. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much. I look forward to coming back.
And just a reminder that if you want to get notifications for videos like this when we put them up, you can get them when we go live by just clicking on the bell icon on YouTube. Do follow us on our social media handles on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram as well to get all the latest news and analysis from an Indian perspective. This is Talking Point on StratNews Global. I'm Amitabh Revi.